Aaron, how's it going, mate?
My man.
Thank you for coming on this podcast.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
You've been very, very busy lately.
Somewhat.
Yeah.
I think busy is a relative word, but yeah, I've been busy.
You've been non-stop, like on every single podcast that I've ever heard of. You seem to be on lots of podcasts now promoting your new book.
That's correct.
Is that right?
That is correct.
Yeah, and your new book, Align Method. I just want to get straight into that and we can talk about that. Tell us what this is about, this new book's about.
So essentially it's like, I think many people in the modern world are completely dependent. Their fitness and wellness is dependent on reaching out to go to a gym or a Pilates or a yoga or, to go see a physical therapist or something of that nature. If you look at the healthiest cultures around the world, they're not gym cultures. They're not people that just spend time pumping dumbbells and doing squats and stuff. Well, they're doing squats, but they're doing it naturally throughout their life. And so our bodies have all the innate inboard healing mechanisms. That's all stock parts, stock systems, software that we've kind of abandoned throughout the modern world. But it's the best ways to be healthy, strong, creative, confident, all that stuff. It's all free and you have access to it right now. We've just, for the most part, have kind of like forgotten that. Right. And so the book is essentially like a user's manual with all of those tools that we've had since the beginning of forever, to start to integrate them into our daily life as modern humans.
Right. What is the healthiest cultures in the world? You said you touched on that.
Well, you could talk about like the blue zones would be an example.
What is that?
So blue zones there's a guy called Dan Buettner that wrote a book called The Blue Zones that gets into various cultures that have a high concentration of centenarians. And so there's actually one in California. There's one in Japan. There's a handful of different places where it's like, wow, that's interesting. There's a lot of these people, they just naturally live to be old. I don't think it is so meaningful that people are living to be old. It's more the quality of life while they're there. So what I'm interested in is, there's, as far as a cultural example, there's places such as Northern Africa, Southeastern Asia, Eastern Mediterranean. They're places that people regularly are going through a full range of motion with their hips, so they're spending time on the ground with regularity, right. Which is something that we've done again since forever. Still healthy people today will still be doing this. Those cultures that go through those ranges of motion just through their daily life tasks, they have minimal to no incidence of osteoarthritis in their hips, very low incidence of OA or osteoarthritis in their knees. Pelvic floor dysfunction is diminished greatly. Fall risk is like practically a non-thing, because the idea of in America, in Western culture, I've fallen, I can't get up. That's the number one reason that elderly need assisted living. So for your parents, for you in the future, for your friends, all that, at some point there may be a moment where you lose that autonomy to, oh man, I went down to the ground and now I literally need to call somebody to help get me back up. Yeah. That's a product of creating a chasm between you and the ground. And if we don't ever leave the ground, because we keep, we squat and we play with kids and we play with dogs and we have a yoga mat down there and a comfy rug and, we drink our coffee while we're sitting on a cushion or something like that. Then that quality stays with us. And it's not just the fact that you can get up and down off of the ground. That's in and of itself is a healing mechanism. When you go through that full range of motion, you are circulating lymphatic fluid out of your lower compartments, out of your legs. You're recirculating blood. You're literally creating more flexibility in and around the arteries and the veins and your vascular system. So yeah, it's just one of those onboard systems that we have that we've kind of walked away from.
So how much research has gone into those cultures?
Well, you can just observe it, as far as isolating exactly what the reason for that is. Yeah. It's very apparent that they're going through those ranges of motion. Yeah. If you look at the Mediterranean, olive oil is a big thing as well. So they're getting healthy fats and various different chemicals and such that are in the olive oil that could potentially be correlated with having healthy joints, and healthy cognitive function, all that. So there's more layers to any question than just one specific dogmatic perspective. Totally. My dogma is more movement. Right. But I host a podcast where I have all sorts of different people on to talk about all sorts of different conversations. Right. And I respect all the different spokes that are connecting into the hub.
Exactly. Because obviously there's tons of different factors that are leading to them living to 100 years and having healthy lives and being able to move and all that. But the reason I asked the question is because how much impact or how strong are their nervous systems? How much of a component is the nervous system? Like how much of this movement is building and strengthening that nervous system over time? How interlinked are the two? Because you mentioned about falls and things like that, proprioception, balance, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah. When you think of like falling, you're going through, it goes from a controlled scenario, a dumbbell curl. Okay, cool. A to B, full extension of the elbow, full flexion of the elbow. Super isolated situation. When all of a sudden I go into a street fight or a boxing match or a parkour thing or wrestling, or I just slipped on like a leaf on the ground.
Right.
That's just complete chaos.
Yeah.
And so in that moment, the way that you prepare for chaos is having a good regiment of practicing those balanced positions when you're not in chaos.
Yeah, totally.
So every moment throughout the day is an opportunity to start to build that matrix around your ankles and your knees and your hips and your spine. And if you can start to cultivate that nervous system through just your daily actions, then when the time comes that you do slip on a thing, chaos is like, oh no, I have patterns to fall back on for that moment.
Totally. It's true functional training. Yeah. Like I have this conversation with clients a lot in the gym. Like people who come to me in the beginning, they don't have a clue how to hinge or squat or like just basic movements. They don't have a clue how to do it, right?
Yeah.
And especially like clients I have that are a little bit older, start to teach them this kind of stuff, and then I translate that to their everyday lives. I'm like, okay, every time you bend down to get something out the bottom of your fridge, you get into a hinge pattern. Every time you get into your car, you get into a hinge pattern. Every time you stand up out of a chair, we're squatting. And if you just create those good habits over time, the simple things that you're talking about, like, oh, I've quickly got to dash across the street because a car come in, they're a little bit quicker and they can do it more easily. It's like survival longevity starts to just go up and up and up.
Movement should be something that you are, not something that you do.
Yeah.
So as long as you put it into a container of, cool, I'm doing my movement. You're like, no, you're still missing it.
Yeah.
So with you guys, with boxing, I'd imagine I experienced this with jiu-jitsu. I started seeing jiu-jitsu in everything. So when anybody would walk, they'd move their shoulders in a certain way. I'd see like, oh, we could like throw from that position, or we could do this, that. Like anywhere you look in the world, I'm like, I see it everywhere. I would imagine it would be the same. I've never experienced that with boxing because I haven't gotten deep enough into it. But I imagine it would be a very similar sensation. When you're walking, you see somebody, you see like, okay, I think you're sizing people up. You just kind of see all these angles. You see
bouncing
how they
down
step.
Main Street, just slipping.
You see somebody walk their foot over. They're kind of like tie their feet up. You're like, oh, that'd be a bad idea. You start seeing it everywhere because you are boxing. Because it's like become a part of you. We can do that with I am, my hips. And I am my spine, and I am stability in my neck and my shoulder, and I am my grip. Because you are all those things. Whether you're paying attention to the meaning of your movement or not, that's what everybody else is paying attention to, whether they realize it or not.
Is there something that people do every day that you see that they shouldn't be doing, like the posture or the way they walk?
Man, all sorts of things.
What's the main thing? What the everyday person can improve on? Right now.
It just depends on the angle that you want to look at it from. So you could look at it from like an emotional perspective, and that's a really fascinating direction to go with posture and like the meaning of posture. So there's an interesting, there's a professor called Albert Moravian that was from UCLA. He came up with a thing called the 55-38-7 principle, which essentially states that 55% of our communication comes from our body language, and then 38 comes from the tone of our voice or tonality, and then 7 is the actual words coming out of our face.
Wow.
And that's if there's any incongruence between what we are saying with our words and what we're saying with the other parts of our communication. And so if I'm saying something to you now, and all of a sudden, my voice starts going high, and I start talking really fast, and maybe my shoulders roll forward, and maybe my hips start kind of veering towards the door, and I don't really want to make eye contact, you're like, whatever I'm saying, you're like, okay, he's clearly lying, uncomfortable, having an anxiety, something's going on. And I see your chatter happening, but I'm really listening to your movement. And so what are we doing throughout the day if we're not paying attention to our postural expressions, the words that are coming out of our body? We're telling people that we feel maybe defensive. We're telling people keep out. We're telling people that I don't feel confident. If you're in, say, a position that would, what would that position be? Like, describe it. If you feel sad, if you feel depressed, if you feel, scared, if you feel defensive, like what's your body do?
It would be like curled up.
Curled up.
Head down, chin.
Head might, exactly. Might go forward. Your shoulders might roll forward. Your spine might kind of go forward. You know, almost like a hawk. When a hawk gets like a bunny or some small game food, they hunch over and their wings go up and they like protect the thing that is defensive, like more food. Yeah. You know, so when you're looking at a person holding their cell phone, what you're seeing is literally that pattern that you just described.
Yeah.
You know, and so you're hunching over, collapse, and then your face might be kind of frowning down a little bit. Your eyes are chronically looking typically down and to the right, because most people are right-handed. You know, whatever down into your dominant side where you scroll with your phone, which that sends. I'll come back to the original question, but that eye movement pattern. You just did a thing with Huberman, who's a buddy, and he actually revised or helped review at least the sight chapter in the book. When our eyes are stuck in that looking down direction, especially off to the right, then there will be a counterbalancing of the muscles in the back of your neck. So you can do it right now. You can think literally, if you look up with your eyes and put your hands in the back, called the suboccipital ridge place in the back of your neck, and just start looking up and down, up, down, up, down. You feel those muscles wink in the back there?
Yeah.
Your eyes are your neck. You know, so there's no separation there. Like all those systems are tied together.
Yeah.
So if your eyes are chronically stuck, you can think of it's like you're pulling the reins of a horse off to the right. Now all of a sudden, okay, now I have to have a compensation pattern in my neck to rebalance my eyes, and then that down through the rest of your body. Now all of a sudden I sent this kink through my whole nervous system because my eyes are chronically stuck staring down at my pocket. You know, and so those are kind of a mechanical perspective, but then when you think of how that affects the way that people perceive this person that might be hunched over, defensive, and then how that person perceives themselves, that could be the beginning of a lot of lost opportunities throughout their life, and they don't realize, you know, why don't I ever get these damn business deals?
Yeah.
You know, why do we scare girls off? I don't really get it.
Right.
They're like, well, you're telling them you're closed.
Yeah.
And so if you could start to come into awareness of like, what is the meaning of my movement on a momentary basis, then you have that rolling momentum, just the way you'd want rolling momentum as an athlete. You know, you don't go into a boxing ring and you're like, cool, like started training this morning before the fight, I'm ready to go.
Right.
You're like, no, I've been training for 20 years and I've had this camp for the last 3 months or whatever it may be. And now I'm like, okay, I'm ready.
Yeah.
It's the same thing with your movement and conversation in your life.
Yeah, well, body language in boxing is huge, and our Olympic sports psychologist used to tell us, and we used to train on it a little bit, about when you're walking around the venue before the fight.
Yep.
Your body language is huge. Your opponent might see you. What do you look like? Now, if you're walking around like we've just said, with your head down, shoulders forward, that's going to give your opponent confidence. But if you're walking around the venue, head back, head up, shoulders back, looking happy, looking confident, looking strong, now your opponent's going to be thinking, why the fuck's he not bothered? We're about to fight. Why is he so confident?
Yeah.
So, yeah, we worked on that as Olympic athletes about the body positioning and your posture. It's huge.
And then that's also tied, so says science, tied into there's various different research I have in the book around the way that actually impacts you on a hormonal level. You know, so there's the research from Amy Cuddy from Harvard, really popular TED Talk, that she had people go into these, she called power woman poses. She's a woman. When you go up in the book, I call them the aligned archetype, being like an upright, strong position like you're describing. Being in those positions for just a couple minutes, what they found was that through taking saliva samples, they would actually increase testosterone levels and decrease stress hormones from just being in that position. That throughout eternity, when my human animal form is shoulders back, upright, breath is calm, down in the diaphragm, forever, that's been like, oh, cool, like we're chilling. We're calm. We won. Yeah. There's nothing to defend. Yeah. We're totally good. You know, and then when you go into the other position, hunched forward, defensive, you know, your fist clenched and your jaw clenched and all that stuff, you're like, oh, we're fighting.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So
your body surges you up with all that stress stuff. Stress hormones are great. You get it every morning, and then you get the melatonin thing, and it kind of cascades at night, and then you do that cycle again. Yeah. Every time you take a breath in, that's a little bit more of a sympathetic stress response. Every time you take a breath out, activates more of that parasympathetic calm side of the nervous system. So there's nothing wrong with stress. Stress is great. The issue comes when you are chronically stuck inside of essentially like a stress prison, because your environment has formed you in such a way that it's an inherently stressful structure to be in, and then your breath pattern is such a way that it's a stress-inducing breath pattern, and then your visual pattern, which I know you went really deep in with Huberman, Dr. Huberman, all of that is another way to start to speak into your nervous system.
Right.
So if you're chronically stuck staring into your phone, or in closed walls, or under artificial lights they have an alternating current, so it's like a really fast flipping.
Yeah.
It's irritating to your nervous system. If that's what your world is, then adrenal fatigue and having issues with sleeping, and maybe feeling kind of anxious and out of it, and really needing a nap but not knowing how to fall asleep, that would make sense if you're a chronically stressed system. But you can start to tease open the knot through all these different angles. Posture is one of them, movement is one of them, but also the sounds in your environment, the way you use your eyes, your breath, all that.
So talking about stress, would you see you've got stress under control and figured out?
I think control would be not the right word for me. Relationship, I have a decent relationship with stress. I think a big thing that I've found, there's been moments where I put what I conceive to be like a fool who persists in their folly will eventually become wise. So if
Sorry, say that again.
A fool who persists in their folly will eventually become wise. So if you keep banging your head against the wall over and over and over again, like, you will learn the lesson at some point. It just might take you 6 months or 10
Right.
years or whatever. So my folly oftentimes is putting too much emphasis on work and too much emphasis on things that don't actually, and not looking at the joy part of the work, or like the community building, or like, and so to me, each day it's very valuable for me to have some piece, or hopefully multiple pieces, of joy infused as regularly as possible. So I like to surf, and I'll ride my skateboard around, and I'll whatever, go boxing with you guys, or go, like, whatever I'm doing that's like this, let's just like, it's fun.
Yeah.
The longer that a person, an adult in quotation, gets away from that, I think the more they start to kind of forget how to do that. And if you forget how to do that, I think it's almost like kind of like dying inside.
Right.
You need to stoke that ember. If you have an ember, you need to blow on it with regularity.
Yeah, I think stress is a big thing. It's a thing that what he's just said there was great for us, because we sometimes forget to enjoy the work that we do, and that's everything really. We if we take a back seat and we look at what we do, we love what we do for all this shit that's going on right now. But sometimes we'll start getting stressed because we want to get there faster. And I'm sure you've been the same at points where you're working, maybe it was on your book or whatever, where you're like, I need to be there. I want to get there. I want to be there right now, and it's hard to be patient, because I think you're obviously you're an entrepreneur. You've got that business mind. Would you say?
Yeah,
you definitely have. Sure. So when I feel like when people's got that mind, it's like we want to get it fast, and because we can't get it fast or get it now,
I think
you feel stressed.
The clearer you are on where you want to go, sometimes the harder it is, because I feel like I'm dead clear on where I'm going and how to get there, and when I want to get there. Like all these goals we set with the company and the business, and where I want to be in 3 years, 5 years, all this kind of stuff. It's clear to me what needs doing, and when it needs to get done, who needs to do it. It's like it's there in front of me. So that kind of creates that like impatience of like, I know what he's doing, like why can't it just be done now, like, you know what I mean? Whereas I feel like people who are like still trying to kind of figure out where they're going, they might have a general idea, might have like the innocence and kind of more fun with it, because it's like, oh, I'm figuring this out as I go.
You're also
so
practicing a pattern of, not you per se, but me, I've been practicing a pattern of like, I will be happy when, I will be enough when, I will be loved when, I will be finally, You're like, that point, that's it. It's like, no, you're there. You're either there or you're not. And so the reality is we're all there. Everybody in the room right now, we're there. Like we've made it. There's at least, depending, some of us more than others, but like there's in fact lots of people around the world, from various countries and whatnot, that would look at living in, wow,
Yeah.
Santa Monica on the beach,
Yeah.
drinking a kombucha, recording conversation. Wow.
Pulling up,
Meanwhile,
cruising around
the
in
people
Teslas.
in these positions oftentimes end up going through the most anxiety and depression, and even
Sure.
suicide.
Oh, totally. Yeah.
Like middle-aged white men ending their lives.
Yeah.
Like, you're supposed to be the king of the world, and it's like, no, you can't. They can't take that, Whereas the people that are closer to the ground, it's like, well, I don't have the Tesla and the podcast and the brand and the stress and the meetings and all this separating my identity from, okay, I am the Tesla and I am my work and I am my watch and I am this idea. The more deeply you're entwined with that idea, it becomes a really slippery slope, because then that can get taken away from you.
Yeah.
It's like investing your happiness in the stock market. If you're looking at the market each day, it's like, it's a great day. Oh my God.
It becomes you,
it's
right?
Like, oh my God, it's the worst day.
It's interesting. I told you this a few days ago. I got in an Uber a couple of weeks ago, and the guy who picked me up is this old guy. He had like a sweater on and a shirt and a tie, and he had his jewelry on and he had his music playing, and he had like this whole setup in his car, and he was just like the happiest guy ever. And I was like, he's got ready and like put his tie on and put his cologne on and all that and got himself ready, and all he's going to do all night is just drive people around LA, picking them up, dropping them off, listening to his music. That's his night out. And he's just in his element, happy as it can get. And I was like envious of that, because I'm like, he's probably not making great money or doesn't have like anything miraculously going on, like materialistic or anything like that, but it's like he don't care. If he can get in his car, drive people around and have a night out in his car just dropping people off, he's just happiness. And it's like, kind of realize that happiness is success, you know?
Well, it becomes the game of happiness can become more complicated the more material stuff you're able to invest your consciousness bandwidth into. So the more stuff you have around you to pour yourself into,
totally,
almost it's like, well, there's almost less bandwidth for the parts that can't be taken away.
I don't know if you think this, but I think LA is probably one of the hardest things about living on the west side of LA. Is like, there's so much amazing stuff everywhere. There's like the best cars, the best houses, people making tons of money, the best foods, the best weather, we got like the best of everything. So like you like, I've got to be in that. I've got to be. There's kind of so much competitive element
you're
to it.
Yourself.
There's always that kind of pressure.
Again, it's just another separation from yourself.
And people say to us, because like, we're from England, like working class towns in England, people over there are like, oh, it must be amazing living out there. I mean, it is, don't get me wrong, but when you're in a small working class town, like, there's no pressure to be like better or succeed or have what everyone else has. It's just, you're almost looked down upon if you've got something more than other people.
Wasn't there that study?
We're kind of getting away from the movement stuff a little bit.
But there was that study before where it said if you win the lottery, 6 months later, your happiness is at the same level as it was before you won the lottery.
Right.
You're rich.
Sometimes even less.
Is that what it is? Yeah.
I mean, a lot of times it's like when people come back from the moon or they, you go to the Olympics or something like that, you've based your whole entire life and identity and happiness around that point.
Yeah.
So having that kernel or belief system that when I get there, I will finally be happy, that gives you hope. Once if you get to that point, we're like, well, I won $500 million. Like, this is it. And you're like, I don't feel any different. Then it's like, oh my God, so where's happiness?
It's like
that can be really sad.
Speaking of the moon, like the whole overview effect. Have you heard of that? The overview effect.
Yeah.
Like when people go up into space. You've heard of this, the overview effect. Like astronauts suffer from it, right? So they're up there for a few weeks, months, or whatever, seeing the Earth from space, and then when they come back, there's like huge amounts of depression because they're like, oh, I've just been at this insane perspective. I've seen the Earth from space and been up there. Now I'm on Earth. It's like,
well, I think the overview effect it's like the overview effect. The way I've heard it is kind of like you're looking down and you're seeing Earth as being this one blue aqueous marble of life, and all of your memories and all of your thoughts and desires and beliefs and heroes and presidents and evil men and, you know, women, and like all those stories are all wrapped up in that one little marble.
Ball. Yeah.
I think that the depression part for people is that they made it to the moon. You know, it's like,
There's nothing else left to do, right?
Fucking sell lemonade?
Yeah.
So with the moon thing, what we talked about, and the Earth thing, like with the Olympics, I was training for the Olympics for 8 years on our program. Reached the Olympics, done well there, and then it was like, how's life? I've reached the highest heights, the highest high ever. I mentioned this on the last podcast a little bit. I've just took heroin in a feeling where you're getting on the Olympic podium. How the hell do I ever come back for that? And now I know writing a book is different, but you've worked on your book. You've told me for like a year now, over a year. You've put all of this time, energy, and effort into this book. It's got released. When did it get released? It wasn't that long ago.
Just a month ago, yeah.
Just a month ago. And is it now? It's like, I can't wait to release the book. I've released the book, and
yeah.
Or is it like, it's Amazon bestseller. That's just fucking great. But then what?
I put a lot of, so one, for like getting the book deal and all that stuff was it was like beneficial and almost like medicinal in a way, and then also just because, you know, I think a lot of people, have experienced like self-worth stuff, you know, or like imposter syndrome and all, like, who am I to be doing anything? Like, you know what? Right. Why should anybody trust me? I'm just some dude, you know, and having that, like, oh wow, like these people in New York, like they thought there's something to this, you know. There was like a little spark of, you know, kind of like Ram Dass calls it, like your somebodyness, you know. So we're trained to be professional somebodies, you know, and underneath all of that, we're kind of this overview effect. We're all kind of a part of this blue marble, and then we kind of puff up our somebody balloon each day with certain things. And the book deal itself was this little like inflation. It's like, oh wow, like I'm somebody,
right?
You know. And then you start setting these deadlines, and people are, you know, puffing you up, and you're puffing each other up, and the whole thing. And then the date finally comes, and yeah, you don't feel any different at all. You're just like, okay, cool, like, here it is, you know. I'm waiting for like an orgasm to happen or something like that. I'm like looking down at my cock. I'm like, no, nothing. I'm like, I don't, like, there's nothing shining. I'm like, literally, I'm just like, coffee, go for a walk. I'm like, okay, here we go.
Do what you do.
Yeah, here we go. This is the next thing.
Are you going to do another one?
Probably I will. Yeah, I'm not thinking about that right now.
You're not?
No.
So what's next?
Well, this is next.
You help a lot of people with
yeah,
all
appreciate
of this
that. Yeah,
we really do.
So this is what's next is, you know, just, so I have an online program as well. And then we have, you know, I'm doing retreats, and the main focus is really making sure that everything else. The book was a nice like wake up call for me of leveling up everything. You know, so all of the ships need to rise together. You know, so looking at the way that I show up in, you know, literally just any relationship, but also from my ecosystem that is my business. You know, so my online program and YouTube stuff and Instagram stuff, and you know, I have the Align Band, which is a self-care product, and like making sure that the user experience with every aspect, any entrance point that you come into the Align brand from, is at least as good as the book, if not better. I think the book is really, really good. So it's like, okay, so that's where I'm at right now, is really polishing every aspect of the engine. Right. Yeah. So looking at it, so I'll finish. Looking at it as almost like you could look at your life like this. Like you are melding, you're creating like the perfect samurai sword. You know, so as opposed to just kind of clanking it together and whacking it, and you're like, cool, like I got a sword, kind of. It's like how precise can we be with, you know, every angle and every hammer, and really getting that thing as sharp and refined and precise and shiny and like in alignment as possible.
Sounds like me talking about the academy. That's what I want the academy to be.
Exactly. Yeah. So you'd be a great person to have part of the team. You know, so you want everybody, and then you exist here because you're a reflection of Tony, or Tony exists for you because he's a reflection of you, or whatever. Like you attract like attracts like. Yeah. And the only way for that like to be attracted is you have to work on your fucking sword. By yourself for long enough that all of a sudden you can level up into other people. It's like, wow, nice sword.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, fuck
I
yeah,
hear
we
that
should,
quite
like,
a lot.
Hold our swords together.
I hear that on a regular basis.
Not that way.
usually when I'm in bed, oh, that's a nice sword.
Yeah, that's what it is. So look,
It's usually me just talking to myself.
yeah. So, but you could look at that. It doesn't need, if you're not, you work any 9-to-5 job for somebody else. Hopefully, it's something that you love and something you stand behind. But that could be the samurai sword for you. Could be your thoughts.
Yeah.
Every thought that comes through between my heart or my stomach or my temples or wherever these thoughts come from, it's what I want it to be. It's and if it's not what I want it to be, I can be in acceptance with that and still maintain contentment. Because maybe it's a dark thought, and I can love that as well. But that, I think, like, we have all these different angles that we can be working from, and just having that concept or idea of, we can learn a lot from, I think, Japanese people. They do a good job with so many things.
Yeah. So moving back onto movement, right? Well, we spoke a little bit about what people are doing wrong daily. What things, what methods or what movement techniques, or what can you give people now who's listening to this so they can improve their lives? Is there anything you can give them?
Yeah,
simple
that's literally what the whole book is. So yeah, I mean, there's
without buying the book.
No. I'm saying that because I'm like, yeah, we can. Pour it all
so
out
you
right
can talk
now.
about this all day long,
yeah,
right?
Yeah.
So a couple of things, a couple of great things that you can give me every day.
Yeah, for sure. So for one, right now we're all sitting in couches. This is potentially kind of sort of a missed opportunity to, like, yoga our hips and our spines and everything. Yeah.
Sit up straight. When you say that, I need to sit up straight.
Yeah. So you could throw a little pillow back behind your thoracic spine right now. So as we're in this position.
So to keep it straight.
Yep. So I'm putting my arm back here as I'm doing this. Now all of a sudden, like, I'm a little bit more upright.
Right.
Yeah, so as I'm literally, like, putting myself into that Superwoman pose just for a second. And so as I'm sitting here, it's not just like a woo-woo thing. I mean, granted, there's all sorts of science around that stuff as well. There's also science around how posture affects memory acquisition. So when you are in more of, like, this kind of stable, upright, confident type position, will be easier. This is done in San Francisco State University. If people want to look it up. It was easier for students to access more, like, feel-good memories from that position. When you go into a hunched over, like, what I call it, like, the mopey archetype position, it's easier for you to access more, like, oh man, I feel, the time that my puppy died, or the time my girlfriend broke up with me, or whatever. Because when you did that, you anchored yourself into that position. You went, oh God, you're breaking up with me? And you, oh. So when you that, like, a neurolinguistic programming term it's called anchoring. You're anchoring that position to that felt state. So now you can access that radio station of thoughts and feelings, 5 years later, 10 years later, 2 months later.
Right. You
do it from a boxing perspective. You do it with music all the time. So before you go into a fight, there might have been a song. It might switch or whatever, but you might have 10 different anchored songs. They're like, oh no, like, I need that song to go in, because it just it wires my state to be ready to kill something.
Music's huge, right?
It's huge.
Music's huge.
Yeah. So is movement.
Right.
Music moves you.
Right. Yeah.
So that music can move you. That anchored music can move you into your anchored movement,
right,
which moves you into hopefully winning the fight.
Yeah. So one, putting your, you see, put a cushion behind your back.
So that'd be a starting point. It was if you have to be in a chair. There's nothing wrong with being in a chair. Like, sitting is the new smoking is a thing. The guy called James Levine, that I reference him in the book quite a bit. He coined that term, and it's not the whole story. It's not a complete statement. Like, sitting is inherent to being a human. You're gonna sit when you're, whatever. If you're whittling something, or if you're weaving something, or you're cutting meat, or you're, like, sitting is gonna be what you do. But the way that you sit, that's the big difference.
Right.
So you could sit in a deep squat. You could sit in a sukhasana, like our cameraman's doing right now. You could sit in a 90-90 position. You could sit in a straddle position. You could toe sit. You could seiza, Japanese for correct sitting. Like, there's a whole plethora of sitting options that are all therapeutic. Instead of looking at any of those other options, we do just this one collapsed in ever since you've been in a stroller.
Right.
So you went through, as a child, you went through all these amazing, beautiful developmental patterns, and you're cross-crawling, and your spinal extending, and you're laughing, and you're reaching up, and then, okay, we're going for a walk, and you go, "Ugh," and you mold up into this stroller, you get pushed around, you know, and then from there, we put you into the child's seat, into the car, we mush you up into the child's seat, back in a fetal position, and they're like, okay, kindergarten's starting. You're like, okay, into the chair, ugh. You know, okay, you really want to climb a tree, I know, you're freaking out. We have medication for that. Yes. You're like, get me out of here. You're like, we need medication.
Yeah. ADHD. Yeah. Fuck me. No, that's so true. That's so true. And yeah, I like what you said. Like, I've seen the way you move. You're great. I'm not as flexible as you, obviously. But like when
you're
kids
stable.
Yeah, but when kids are born, or when they start to walk, they get into that squat position and they sit in that position all day long.
Mm-hmm.
No, that what's the name
It's a
of that?
resting position. Malasana is what it's called in yoga. Third world squat.
Right? Can you do
baby
that?
squat?
You
Whatever.
just sit like that, right?
Yeah. And then just on the baby thing, the diaphragm breathing's huge because by nature, when we're kids, we're belly breathing.
Yep.
Right.
And then we just gradually come out of that.
Unless you're panicking,
then,
you know. So kids are just they're perfect readers of the environment, translators of the environment. So if they're freaking out, they're freaking out.
Yeah.
You know, and they're not going to be diaphragmatic breathing anymore. They're going to be breathing up in their clavicles and their neck and shoulders, and breathing through their mouth, and they're maybe take a deep breath in. You know, I'm surprised.
Yeah.
You know, so they are literally back to like the overview effect. They are like one with the environment.
Yeah.
Then you attach your somebodyness, to go back to the same thread of the Ram Dass stuff, of who I think I am and who I think I'm supposed to show up and carry myself. You know, and so then you have that idea, that construct of who you're supposed to be, and then you start missing some of those natural reactions to things, and you just bottle them up because now's not an appropriate time to respond that way. Whereas a baby just and then backed into laughing and then loving and then
Yeah.
You're like, that's what a baby does. It experiences emotion in, emotion out, emotion in, emotion out.
Yeah.
Adults sometimes they don't have as good of like purgative systems for emotion, and then eventually it doesn't just go away. You know, you swallow it, you keep on moving on with your day, and then you think it's gone, but maybe that underlying tone of anxiety could be bottled up emotions that you hadn't addressed for the last 2 months, 2 years, 20 years.
Yeah.
You know, and so there's a lot of different options to slowly purge out that stuff, though.
Yeah. With your movement, are you just in good habits now? You've been doing it for that long. Are you in good habits all the time with your daily movement, with your daily posture, with the way you're sitting? Do you do it without thinking, or have you still got to think about it?
If I want to go through and assess my posture right now as I'm sitting in this chair, there's all sorts of things that I could like tear apart with it. You know, so I think that what it is if you can insulate yourself with enough health inducing factors in your daily life, then you can get away with almost anything.
Right.
But if you don't insulate yourself, now all of a sudden you're very susceptible to, you know, injury or, you know, bad habits, or you know, going out and having a beer could all of a sudden turn into like a real issue, or going out and like, oh, I'll have a cigarette. You know, it's like, if you're a healthy person that you're taking walks regularly and you're squatting and you're moving and you love your family and you're living a life on purpose and you feel like it's just like, wow, like I'm just like vibing, that if that person smokes a cigarette or has a big, you know, juicy steak or something like that, I'm like, that's great, like no problem. You know, but you put that same cigarette and the same steak on a person that's stressed out and wound up and been sitting in a cubicle for the last 6 months and looking at artificial lights and hasn't seen the sun for a really long time and feels lonely and disconnected and doesn't even know what their purpose is in this world. I'm just like floating through the world.
Yeah.
Give that person a cigarette or any drug for that matter, and it's like a totally different equation.
Yeah.
You know, so it's always our response. You know, it's like terrain theory, which is like the idea that bacteria interacts with our terrain, and it's our terrain that determines whether we get sick. You know, so as opposed to it being like the bacteria, giving the bacteria all the power and the pathogens all the power, it's like no, like what's the interaction of those bacteria with the terrain being me?
Yeah. That's huge. That because like if just on immunity in general, like people can travel, go on a long flight or whatever, and then they get there and they feel like shit, and then they're sick and all that.
Yep.
And then like I do all right with it. Like I take care of myself and like build that immunity leading up to like a long travel, for example. If like fly forever and just non-stop bounce around, and then take in that bacteria like you're saying and just be completely fine with it.
Yeah, it's no problem.
Body just takes it.
Yeah, it's all about it's not what did you do before the flight. What did you do, 6 months before the flight?
Exactly, yeah.
Right.
Like, how do you live on a regular
And
basis? Can you handle that stress
Yeah.
with ease?
That's
that physical
literally the
stress
same
with ease.
conversation as before. It's not what did you do the day before your boxing match.
Exactly.
It's
yeah.
like, who are you?
It's what's the regular
Who the fuck
pattern.
are you?
Yeah.
You know, like that's
Yeah,
what
yeah.
matters.
Totally.
Like I don't care what you did this morning.
Yeah, exactly.
I love that. That's great. So I was on your podcast, the Align podcast.
Align
it's called.
podcast,
Yeah.
yeah.
So I came on that, and it was a great experience. Coming to your house, then we did some breathing exercises.
Yeah.
Then we got in your ice bath. Then we did the podcast in a sauna.
Mm-hmm.
It was amazing. It was like a great day. and I remember leaving there thinking, wow, that was awesome.
Cool.
That was really good. So talk a little bit about the breathing, because that's a big thing that you do as well, right?
Sure.
Yeah, you're in the movement, but
Yeah.
breathing as well, like the benefits of the sort of breathing. What sort of breathing do we do, and the benefits of that sort of breathing?
Yeah. So we did kind of like a holotropic style, or kind of similar to like a Wim Hof type style. We're essentially kind of doing like a nervous system reset in a way. So you're doing like deep. We do that 30 times, a la Wim style, and then we do a long exhalation, and then a breath hold in after that, and then a kind of like a normal inhalation and a breath hold after that. And a couple things happen with breathing like that. One, when you're taking yourself through, in the book we call it like your fifth gear of respiration. You're like huffing and puffing on the top of a mountain, or you're having sex, or you're like whatever it may be, that you're just you're going into that higher end of your respiratory capacity. Well, if you don't have a mountain to climb up or a person to climb on top of, you can just do that style of breath and mimic that at a physiological level, just literally sitting in a room.
Yeah.
So if you wanted to kind of put yourself more into that state, like the way that you'd feel after sex or after climbing that mountain, you're like, fuck, man, I'm in this office. Like, this is great listening to this podcast, but like, I don't have these kind of options, man. Like, okay, cool. What if we replicated that?
What if you have a wank and then breathe it out?
Yeah, exactly.
Or breathe like that
what
and
people
then have a
don't
wank.
see is my hand gesture as I'm saying all this. So as you're sitting there in your chair, ideally the floor even, so if you're on the floor, you're mobilizing your hips and all that stuff. And to go through that range of motion, you had to, open up your ankles and your knees. It's like a healthy thing to do. But you could take yourself through that breathing practice and literally put you into that same, mental, emotional, and physiological state that you would be had you been doing exercise.
Yeah.
Because your respiratory function is directly tied back into the rest of the systems. The other thing that we do with that is the long exhalation and then a breath hold, which helps us become less sensitive to CO2. So when you need to take a breath in, it's because you have that buildup of CO2 in your bloodstream. If you become more comfortable with not taking air when you think you need it, all of a sudden your body will end up actually, the red blood cells will create more oxygen more effectively because they get the signal that you have less access to breaths. So if there's less air in the room, your body's like, okay, well, it's just like a business. Like if you're a $1 billion a year business, and be like, okay, we're spending money, like, woo, like, get it, whatever it is, don't care, get it, but it's like, no, we're like a $50,000 a year business, and I have employees to pay. Right. Like, we're like scratching.
Yeah.
You're like, okay, well, let's get real precise. And so it's a similar thing with the way that your circulation of red blood cells works in your body. If you get the memo that you're when you're just eating a donut, it's like you're like, okay, that's like a gluttonous bloodstream. Like we'll just have to produce. We don't have to be so efficient. because there's just so much air. You know, so you can kind of teach yourself to be more efficient with breath by restricting a little bit, and you'll literally have richer red blood cells of oxygen.
And then as well, when we were doing it, I've done it before. I've been to a Wim Hof seminar, and the tingles that you get in your full body.
Tetanies is what they call it.
Tetanies,
yeah.
That feels amazing. What is that? Is that just the oxygen coming into the red blood cells, or what is that?
I don't have enough of a scientific explanation of what that is exactly. I could bullshit.
It's the reoxygenation of your blood. So like it's like the regenerating of your blood cells, I think.
Yeah,
when I'll do like hot sauna, cold plunge, and then straight out of the cold plunge into a warmer water again. That's when I get the tingles,
right?
And it's just that reoxygenating of the blood from the cold plunge that I think that creates that effect.
Yeah, I don't know. I've like done enough podcasts where I try to bullshit my way through answers. And then I listened after. I was like, that was wrong. That was
It's always better if you don't know the answer.
Just like, I don't know why we get those tingles.
I think it's the I think it's the capillaries that are responding that create the tingles.
Does anyone know?
Could be wrong.
No, I'm with that. I'm down with that.
Then the ice bath. Then the ice bath. I love the ice baths. I like the cold showers, but the ice baths. Talk a little bit about that.
Yeah,
is that in your book?
Ice bath's great.
Do you talk about that in your book as well?
Oh yeah. I'd put it all in there. Yeah, the ice bath is great. Because again, all this stuff ties together. You know, so if you are a body that is accustomed in always being in a set temperature room, you know, so wow, the temperature never really leaves like 68. You know, your body's just like, okay, cool. Like, well, I pretty much from a thermoregulatory perspective need to do absolutely nothing. You know, so cool, you got this. All right, we're just going to atrophy and kind of just get lazy and kind of walk away from you. Whereas if you put yourself into a cold environment or a hot environment, all of a sudden your body's like, oh, you need me? So like, okay, I'll show up.
Yeah.
You know, and so all of a sudden you get, you know, this release of cold shock proteins if you're in the cold, or heat shock proteins if you're in the heat, and you get this immune response. And, you know, Wim Hof was shown to be able to reverse I think it was a coli or something terrible. They injected them. I think it was a coli, but maybe not. Fact check that part. But they injected the contestants or the subjects in the study, the breathers and the colders, with something that was a pretty strong bummer. I think a coli. And through the breath practice and the meditation and the cold exposure, because it's not just any one, it's all tied together, they were able to boost their immune system enough that it actually wasn't an issue at all. We all have cancer. Like, it's in our bodies. It's happening right now.
We all have cancer.
There's cancer cells. Yeah, it's a thing.
You kind of said something.
Oxygenation of cells. Yeah.
That's scary.
Oxidative stress.
It's not.
I mean, it is scary to think that it could come out and you could be fucked up. Like,
I mean, we all have staphylococcus, and, you know, we have that's on our skin. It's there. Whether it expresses its style. A lot of people have herpes. You know, it's like a lot of people have herpes their whole life and they don't even realize it because they hadn't been wigging out and stressed, and they sleep and they feel resourced, and you're like, oh, wow.
Right.
You know, a lot of people die and then the coroner finds like, wow, they had a pretty fucked up tumor this whole time.
Wow.
You know, it's like, they just kind of keep on going. You know, they were all right.
You
know, it's how you respond.
If you think about it, when you're taking CO2, that's oxidative stress, right? That's stressing out the cells.
Sure.
It's just how that's managed and how those cells recover that stop them from creating the tumours.
Yeah. So after I left your place, I was like, I need to be like more like Aaron. I'm looking at buying a sauna, an ice bath. I'm start breathing. I'm start walking around with my shoulders back. I'm start trying to do a splits. I want to be him.
That's great.
No, but
deep breathing when you're wanking.
Yeah.
Exactly. That's what I did right after you left. I did a deep breathing wank. So much tension.
Yes. Well, let's cut that little clip out, and that'll be a good 15-second Instagram story. Where was I going to go? Oh yeah, so your ice bath. Let's talk about your ice bath, because what I've done in the past is I've just bought buckets of fucking ice and poured them in my bath and got in there.
Yeah.
But I love that style of ice bath you've got, your deep chest freezer.
Yeah, it's like incredibly inefficient to have like the pig trough and like go
Right.
down to the market and buy 50 pounds of ice, and they have all these plastic bags, and it
Yeah.
costs you like $40 to have the experience. It's like wild. You can buy, I have a blog. It's alignedpodcast.com/ let's just go to blog. What is it? Cold plunge. Anyways, there's a blog I break down every individual detail where you literally just click the link, and you can go to Home Depot, or they'll come to you rather, and it's like $500, and it's nothing. It's crazy.
Have you seen them? The deep chest freezers.
So you can get like the proper, cold thermogenesis super baths that are like super expensive.
Yeah.
I mean, I just get the ice chest, and you literally, they deliver it. A couple dudes come with their like back strap things. They put it wherever the heck you want. You seal up one seam on it, which I have broken down in the blog. You're off to the races. Fill it up with some water, and get it down to like 40, 45 or so.
So that's one of them things.
Yeah.
It's like perfect size.
It's super simple, man. Yeah, and it makes like what I like about it. The reason that I do my podcast with the the ice bath and the sauna, and I'll usually do like acro yoga and weird crap with people, or even do like a session with them beforehand, is I like to create an experience for the person. And what happens as you do that, there's a fancy term called embodied cognition, which essentially means that our thoughts, feelings, emotions respond to textures in our environment, temperatures in our environment. We are our environment.
Right.
So if I am holding a warm cup of tea or coffee or what have you, as I'm talking to someone, I will perceive that person as being a little bit warmer, a little bit more open and like comforting.
Yeah.
Whereas all of a sudden, like, you start cranking up the air conditioning in the room, or you make the lights really violent. Sometimes I did like a TV thing like last week, and it's like a weird, it's so different than most podcasts because you're just like poof, like full lights. You're like, okay, like be normal. And that from an embodied cognition perspective, it's really hard to be normal when you're like a deer in the headlights type sensation.
Yeah.
So being cognizant or being aware of the environment, it's like in psychedelic research, it's like all about set and setting. So when someone comes into a room, what's the quality of the rug on the ground, and what's the colors in the room, and what's the the temperature of the room, what's the smell of the room, what's the organization of the room, because all of that is setting the tone for the way that person literally thinks, feels, and perceives you. So that's kind of why I have it, and just putting people into like a peak experience in quotations, I think creates good conversation.
Yeah, it's great. Well, mate, it's been great having you on this episode. I've got a list of things here that I wanted to talk about, and I think we touched on one of them.
Good. That's good. That's not bad.
It's good, isn't it?
That's not bad.
Yeah, but no, it's been
off one by one.
Yeah.
But it's been great, mate. If people want to learn more about you, where can they go?
I mean, get the Align Method book would be the first obvious thing. That's Amazon would probably be the most likely place. Yeah. So that's, it's in any bookstore or any place that you go for that.
Great.
But yeah, Amazon would probably be the easiest place. And then I also host the Align podcast. Then I'll release our episode on the same day. Whenever this comes out,
nice,
I'll be
great,
releasing an episode with you, Tony.
Yeah.
And everything's at Align podcast on Instagram and all that stuff.
And I recommend go to his Instagram, check it out, because you've got educational stuff on there as well, and it's cool to see you doing these mad movements.
Yeah, it's mostly thirst trap and dick pics, but then there's the occasional instructional video.
Great. Thank you for listening. Yeah, nice one. You're the man. So you're going to get loads of followers now, everyone will see you. And your breathing methods of wanking.
Yeah.
Thank you for listening. Until next time, we'll see you then.